So here we are, roughly 1 year on from Battalion's initial Kickstarter, and the first real gameplay to be released showing the direction the game is heading in. This is of course a very early stage, as this footage is from pre-alpha, so it's not even in the alpha stage of the game yet, but I feel like the gameplay even at this point can kind of give some indication of the future direction. The gameplay is currently a TDM on a map called Manor House, so I'll go over some of the points within the footage and then give you some new information that isn't known yet. At this point already you can hopefully see how the developers have tried to base the movement off ProMod, including both strafing and leading. Fortunately, I went to the studio again last week and was able to play this map for a couple of hours, and the movement is pretty good at this point. But it will no doubt be tweaked further in the future, as I believe that the movement even right now is easier than ProMod. I also believe that one of the largest things people will notice the most about this gameplay is the animations, as they're really what make a FPS game feel nice to play. As the start of the video displayed, these are currently all in the first phase, especially the third person animations. All the third person animations have been completely redone already and are actually being implemented now, so the third person animations in this video I guess are completely irrelevant at this point. In terms of gunplay, it's also pretty good so far. Currently, as displayed in this video, I was only able to play a total of 4 weapons, including the Thompson, the MP40, the Kar 98 and the M1 Garand. I believe there will be more in the alpha in just over a month's time. I think at this point there is probably somewhat a lack of recoil in the automatic weapons, but as I mentioned, it's such an early stage, there hasn't really been that much testing, which is where the closed alpha comes in, and that's where we will see a lot of changes, I imagine, to the gameplay and the gunplay in general. It's really just trying to get the game to a playable state by that point. In terms of grenades, again, everything is very early and all of the animations will most likely be reworked and readjusted in the future. The grenades are of course also an early stage, so no doubt to be reworked, as well as the UI, as it's currently very basic. As you can see on the right with the Unreal Engine stat FPS command, the FPS is always around 144. This is because it's currently capped at 144 as stated at the start of the video. The game seems relatively well optimized at this point, and the max FPS for the game is most likely going to be 250, the same as ProMod, as you don't really need more than that. But of course, for any COD 4 players, the sweet spots of 250 FPS and 125 limits aren't going to give you any advantage in terms of jump height or distance like in the Quake engine. But if you do still have a potato PC, there are some pretty awesome optimization settings you can use within the game. Unfortunately, I don't have the menu to show you, but you can basically, within the game menu, there are graphic options which turn off certain aspects which don't affect the gameplay. For example, you can turn off any foliage such as trees outside of the map bounds or walls, so you can get better FPS by rendering less objects which aren't a part of the actual playable map and don't affect gameplay. As well as this, you can also turn off other options such as more advanced shadows. In terms of maps, as I mentioned in a previous video, there were 4 maps in development on my second visit, and I still believe this to be the case. It seems that this Manor House map is one of the more polished ones in the pre-alpha state, and I'm not entirely sure that the map is big enough for competitive play due to sprint in its current state, but I have no doubt that this map will be changed loads in the development of the game. Something to note is that the game was originally stated to have an Omaha Beach Map, which it did, as I played it on my second visit, and it looked quite nice, and it was based on the top of the hills once the beach had already been taken. But since then the developers have had a change in heart, and now the map is no longer based around Omaha Beach, as they said they wanted a different feel for it due to it not doing D-Day justice for those who were interested in it. They're now reworking it from another angle, which I believe when I saw it, it was based around a large radio tower. I think that covers at least a few important points. Most of the other stuff you can probably see for yourself in the gameplay. I now want to move on and talk about one of the biggest possible changes to the game in the future, but the whole idea is still a prototype at this point, but it's an interesting idea in terms of gameplay. So on the forums there are always hundreds of suggestions, and one topic that comes up quite often is regarding an economy system. And in one of these forum posts, the developer Joe replied saying that there would be no economy in terms of cash for guns, but they have a unique way of playing search and destroy in a CSGO meets COD 4 meets Hearthstone kind of way. So obviously this can be quite confusing, and I'm going to expand on this and try and explain the general concept to you. So the economy system, which at this point and for the sake of this video we will call the reinforcement system, is an idea to give the game more depth in terms of competitive play. COD 2 and COD 4 are great games, and of course the games that Battalion is based on, but they are also very one-dimensional and flat in terms of the gameplay it offers. Simply spawning with the same weapons every round and essentially doing the same thing every round. Some would say this is great because everybody is on a level playing field all the time, which I would agree with, But the reason CSGO, for example, is so successful is because it has so many layers in its gameplay. It has eco rounds, forcing, gun rounds, money management for both your team and the opponents, set plays depending on your weapons and utility. And this not only adds more depth to the gameplay, but also gives casters and analysts a lot more to talk about, and it adds a lot more tactics to the game. So the reinforcement system is in its own way an economy system, just different to CS due to the players not having to do eco rounds with pistols or getting cash per kill and buying weapons. The Hearthstone part comes in mostly regarding the UI. Imagine it like a card system that every few rounds your team gets a set amount of utility such as smokes and grenades to use in X amount of rounds. And you have the ability to disperse this utility as you want. For example, you could use 5 smoke grenades and 5 grenades in one round if you wanted to. But because of this, you now have limited smokes for the remaining rounds. With a system like this, it allows for constructed set plays using said amount of utility, not only for your team but also for the enemy team, as they can now micromanage your reinforcements utility. Knowing you used 5 smokes last round, they can now use weapons and tactics according to that, such as taking a sniper in a certain area knowing you won't have the smokes to cover the crossing in the road. At this point, as I said, it's still a very early prototype, so it's not defined what utility or weapons would be put in said reinforcement system. It could even be a shotgun, for example, or an extra SMG. It's completely unknown yet, and of course a system like this would need a lot of testing to balance. On top of that, because this game will have a ranked matchmaking system at some point, and with this reinforcement system, if it is implemented, it will no doubt create trolling. It's impossible to not have trolls in pretty much any matchmaking system in any game ever. So there will be thought around countering this. Some options are always having a system where for team games, scrims, tournaments and LANs, the reinforcements can be controlled by one player, essentially the captain, the shot caller, while for matchmaking systems, individuals control their own reinforcements. Again, a lot of testing to be had and currently just an idea, which probably won't be implemented for some time, but I believe a good idea to making this game have more depth and work well in a competitive scene. There's probably a lot more things I could talk about in this video, but I think generally most of the questions people ask me on previous videos can be answered by just watching the video. If you do have any questions which haven't been answered yet, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try and answer them if I can. For the rest of the video, I'll just leave you with the gameplay and sound, as I'm sure that's what you care about the most. Goodbye. For the bomb plants, you are able to plant around the area of the bomb, like in CS, rather than directly on the bomb like in COD 4. So this allows for players to have a lot more positioning for after plant situations. The bomb will be very similar to that of COD 4 and CS rather than COD 2, in that the bomb will be a physical object that players have to carry to the site. Only one player can carry this at a time, obviously.